wanted my students to not only use your journal, it's available for them as a reference. They can go back and look at some of the work they've done and some of the things they've learned. But I also like to include it as it can be memorabilia to them. So we take class pictures, we take pictures of some of the things activities that we're doing, and we put those in our journal as well. So it becomes something that they really like. We do an 8th graders day. That's one of the things that we do. We have the 8th graders come towards the end of the year, and I ask the students to pick out something that they, some concept or some principle that they learned, and share it with the 8th graders. And so they go back through their journals and they look to see, and they're excited. They say, oh, here's this one, and they find one right away that they like in their journal, and they're prepared right away to present that to the 8th graders. Another way would be maybe we're teaching the concept of faith, and they'll say, oh, I remember when we did the faith stool, and that was a page that we did on faith. And so we'll turn back to that, and we'll maybe read and look at what we had said there and compare it as we're talking in whatever we're talking about that particular day. Well, I start out by telling my students, first of all, that this journal it's their book, and so the first thing we do is we make a title page, and we give the book a title. And it's going to be whatever book of scripture we are, and they put their name as the author, and they put their date, and they can decorate it and put whatever pictures on it they want. I always encourage them to do their very best work, because I say someday you're going to look back at this, so do your very best work in it. Then we go to the next page, or we leave a page for the class picture in there. Sometimes that's the facing page. It faces that title page. And then the next page we have is the table of contents, because a book really needs a table of contents. And so we label it table of contents. We have 2 columns, and we number it. And then I have them put the numbers on all the pages following, so each page has a number. And then our journal is set up and it's ready to go. And then we always start with our plan of salvation is always our first entry. I just kind of pick the activities that I think look appropriate. Sometimes I see it right away in the lesson. Sometimes I might actually come and think, oh my goodness, that would be perfect. I think that's actually what I did with Helaman 5:12. I started teaching the lesson. I'm going, no, we should draw this, and it should be a journal page, and that one, and that worked out really well. But more often than not, sometimes something in the lesson, and I'll think, no, we're not going to do that on the board. That'll be perfect for the journal. I always look for something that's going to be meaningful to them, and I always, there's got to be a title, and I always make sure the scripture reference is on there. And I also want them to put the date on there as well, because I want them to know the date that they wrote these things down. And I always tell them how much room it's going to take so they can plan it out. And I encourage them to use colored pencils or whatever else to decorate it. And I always make sure that they have a pretty good idea of where we're doing. Sometimes I will even, if I know it's going to be a whole page that's going to be fairly involved, I will even do a sample page, or I'll be doing it on the board and they'll be writing it in their journal at the same time. But sometimes the page is already done and I set it up so they can see, and I say, this is how it's going to turn out. And so we'll work together, but they can kind of see the spacing on the page because they like to know that. Journal. So, for example, like when glue-ins work fine with glue, better to put in pictures with double-stick tape because they're kind of stiffer paper. That works better as well. Handouts sometimes get put in. Sometimes a handout will be put in and you have to size it to fit the journal, because I just use the journal I get from the church. Well, often if it's going to be a little more involved and we want to draw it on the board because it's more interesting for the class to draw it on the blackboard, then we'll draw it on the blackboard, and then I have the students get up in the front of the class and I take their picture with the picture on the board, and I make sure on the board it's written, the scripture reference is up there. And so they love to get in the picture and smile, and then I print those out and we stick them in the journal the next day. So today we were talking about Malachi 1, and we took the journal activity directly from the lesson manual, where they had us draw 4 sheep. And so the first thing we had the students do is title the page. And so the title of the page we put down was The Good Offering, and then we titled it Malachi 1. They drew the 4 sheep, and then they went to the scriptures, and from the scriptures they knew how to draw their sheep, and they labeled the 4 sheep. And then after that, we had a writing activity that for the bottom of the page, and so it was a 1-page activity. Once they were through with that, then they can go back and put in the table of contents, the title of the page, and the scripture reference. And I have some students that keep up with that quite well. Other students, we have to go back and we'll take 5 minutes on a day and they can catch up their table of contents.